Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the 205th session of the online Optom learning series, OOLS. And for today's session, we have with us Karin Brown-Balvert. Karin is an FBDO. She is specialized in contact lenses and is also a member of the British Contact Lens Association. On the professional upfront, she is the Professional Affairs Manager for Eaglet Eye. And as we all know, Eaglet Eye is the company who have been instrumental to develop the eye surface profiler. They are the manufacturers of the eye surface profiler. Karin is a UK registered contact lens optician, and she has been into the optical business and industry for probably a couple of decades, if I may put it that way, that experience. And besides professional affairs, she has a lot of interest in contact lens practice, myopia management, specialty contact lens fitting, and dry eye management as well. And today she's going to take us through the eye surface profiler, and she's going to talk about the use of it. How can we put this into practice? And also she will share a couple of cases at the end. So thank you, Karin, for joining us today. And, let me just leave the screen time to you now.
Thank you very much for having me. So yes, today we're going to be talking about profilometry. And yes, of course, as Fahrdin mentioned, the eye surface profiler is a profilometer. There are others available, but of course, my knowledge is greater about the ESP. Saying that some of these slides might look familiar if you joined us last year for the webinar, so some of it might be a bit of a recap of what you already know, and for others this might be completely new. And if you have got any questions, just pop it in the chat box. So topics today. We're looking at sort of the great unknown, the sclera. Of course, a lot of research has been done in recent years on the sclera, so we do know a little bit more. But how do we measure it? So how best to assess the sclera with ocular profilometry, how to best fit scleral lenses based on SAG, empirical fitting, and then, as mentioned, we've got a few case reports as well. So the great unknown, sclera. So, of course, through research, and this is sort of the very basic research that we started with, the ocular surface and its anatomical geometrical characteristics. So approximately 7 millimeter space between the limbs and the insertions of the rectus muscle, and the more regular, closer to the limbus, it gets more irregular beyond the 15 millimeters. So sort of looking at the measurement, so you're looking at the limbus, it gets more irregular. So possible factor could be the influence of the orientation of the extraocular rectus muscles. The scleral shape might be influenced by the proximity of these two muscles. Some more research that's quite a few years old is actually looking at sort of where the limbus starts, so the transition from the transparent cornea to the opaque sclera. It's approximately 1.5 millimeters, and through research they've realized there's different shapes to this limbal area, so the limbal transition. So we've got the gradual convex, we've got the gradual tangential, marked convex, marked tangential, and convex concave. So looking here, we sort of have the number one of this would be the gradual tangential, number two is the marked convex, and then the gradual convex. Almost non-existent is the convex concave. So the actual analysis of the anterior scleral shape and its role designing fitting of the scleral contact lenses. So if you sort of think about a chord of 12.8, the average shape of the eye is nearly rotational stable. If you take it out slightly further, so you're taking it to 15 millimeters, the eye becomes much more asymmetric. So the nasal segment always tends to be a little bit flatter, and it's got the concave corneal scleral transition. If you're looking at the temporal segment, so you're getting a steeper scleral angles and a convex corneal scleral transition. again, sort of looking now at the cornea and the sclera. Of course, we know a lot about the cornea. We've always measured it with topographers, but actually you don't really know what's going on the sclera. We just measure it using a topographer. So no statistical significance between the sclera, but certainly scleras are much more against the rule than cornea. So if you're looking at the graph here, we've got the with the rule corneal topography versus scleral topography. And through this research, they've realized that the scleras are much more against the rule than you would expect with something like the cornea. The other thing that they're looking at in all of these studies is actually what happens to the sclera with something like eye disease, so something like keratoconus. If we're thinking about keratoconus, the anterior corneal curvature, so the steeper the anterior cone, the more asymmetric the sclera becomes. And I suppose that's probably not hard to understand, because actually with the cone, you are going to get a more asymmetric sclera. So various studies on that. So the human sclera is rotationally asymmetric. The magnitude of scleral asymmetry increases with the radial distance from the corneal apex. So of course, if there's something going on the cornea, you are going to get a more irregular sclera. So non-contact scleral topographers and the use of the new methodologies for describing the shape of the sclera for each individual could be a tremendous advantage when fitting lenses. So these are different studies. So you can see names there. We've got Alejandra Concejo. She does quite a lot for research with the scleral, with the profilometer. And the same, she comes up in another story with Robert Iskander. So various studies show that the scleral shape and its correlation with the corneal parameters. So again, with keratoconus, the steeper the cone, the more asymmetric the sclera becomes as well. And sort of looking again at the difference in the corneal scleral topography profile between healthy and keratoconus corneas. Again, different studies have been looking into these sort of things. So the corneal scleral profile in keratoconus presents higher levels of asymmetry, as we mentioned in the last slide, compared to healthy eyes, especially in the eyes with the moderate and advanced stages of the disease. So the bigger the cone, the more irregular your sclera becomes. I'll just pause on that and you can have a look at some of these studies. So the correlation of corneal and scleral topography in cases with ectasias and normal corneas, again, the more diseased the eye, the more irregular the sclera becomes as well. So a slightly more basic study was done in actual the assessment of the scleral shape. So using a new wide field ocular surface elevation topographer, so we're talking profilometry. There were 152 subjects, 12 had to be included because there was incomplete data, but actually through this study they found that there were different groups. Of course, you've got your spherical group, you've got your regular toric groups, you've got your quad specific and irregular. And as you can see here with this study, spherical is really only 5.7%. So the regular toric comes up at 28.6% and quad specific 40.7%. Irregular, so we're thinking of something like a toric pattern with elevations, depressions, irregularly spaced. So perhaps something like a pinguecula or a pterygium. Of course, we've got a lot more incidences of that as well. And if you were to if you fit something like a scleral lens, it's super important to know exactly what's going on the sclera. Of course, we did work out that actually there's a lot of toricity that's going on the sclera, but of course we've also got the toricity with the rule. You can see against the rule, you've got your oblique toricity and you've got your irregular toricity as well. So, and then of course we mentioned it earlier, so the anatomical and geometrical characteristics, that's easy for you to say on a Sunday afternoon, evening for some of you. The sclera can also be irregular and have different elevations like pinguecula, pterygium, cervical blebs, and scars. So from that point of view, again, if you're fitting a scleral lens, it's good to know what's going on. So does the cornea give us enough information for fitting scleral lenses? Yeah, it helps, but it's not adequate without much trial and error. So can we predict the scleral shape by assessing the cornea? Definitely not. So the more accurate scleral data will help you improve fitting success rates, especially for complex eyes. So really anything keratoconic, if you're thinking of something like pinguecula, the more you know about the sclera, the easier it is going to be to fit a contact lens. So better data will reduce the learning curve for new scleral fitters. So I suppose if you're new to the actual fitting, the more you know about it, the less trial and error you're going to have. So we're taking guesswork out of scleral lens fitting. Of course, you can still place lenses on the eye, but actually the more you know, the better pick you can have of the lenses that you need. So we're just going to look at how to best assess the sclera here. So in actual fact, scleral mapping tools, we can use a slit lamp. We can have a closer look at the different structures of the front of the eye and inside the eye. OCT, of course, gives you a qualitative assessment of the eye and the lens. Corneal topography, so characterizing the curvature of the cornea, providing topographic maps of the cornea. Profilometry would be quantitative and qualitative evaluation of the complete cornea. So scans up to 20 millimeters, providing elevation maps. So looking at the profilometry, so corneal scleral topography or profilometry, where we're sort of naming it both because we also just want to make sure that it's not just the sclera we're measuring, we're also measuring the cornea as well. So it measures the full cornea, limbus to limbus, and the sclera. It gives you real data with no extrapolation or stitching. So in actual fact, if you've got a good scan, the lens can be designed to do that scan that you have. So it does come down to taking good images, but it also means that we're not stitching. So as soon as you start stitching an image, you're going to be guesstimating or you're going to be guessing a little bit again. So objective analysis of the scleral lacerations, as mentioned earlier, something like a pinguecula or pterygium. And it is the end of guesstimation. So getting good scans just means that you can take the guesswork out of scleral lens fitting. So it's technology to efficiently fit scleral lenses. In actual fact, it's not just scleral lenses, so it is any of the specialty lenses. So anything that's not off the shelf. So it could be a gas permeable lens, it could be something like Ortho-K, soft lenses, hybrid lenses, and scleral lenses as well. So how to best assess the sclera? So here we're looking at the height map, which gives you the absolute height, and it is the real shape of the eye. But actually looking at the graph here, it's a limitation and it does not give you enough detail. So looking here, we're looking at the bisphere elevation map. So we've got two spheres. So we've got the corneal sphere and we've got the scleral sphere, and they're actually laid on top of each other. So it gives you the relative height of each point. So anything above the reference sphere and anything below the reference sphere. So above the reference sphere is in red. So you're thinking about your cones. You're thinking about your pingueculas. Anything blue and green is actually below the reference sphere. So it also highlights local elevations like the pinguecula that you can see here. We can also look at tangent angle maps. So they represent the tangent angle of every cornea and scleral point. It's more like the corneal topography of the topography curvature map. So I suppose if you think about what can we compare it to? So a tangent angle map is a little bit more like the topography curvature map. So how to best fit scleral lenses based on sag? So of course now we've got this equipment, it's given us the sags, how are we going to use it? So here we're looking at the sagittal height, so the distance from the ocular surface of each chord length to a line tangent from the corneal apex. So we're looking here at, if we sort of say chord length of 13, that's measured from the center to the actual edge of that 13. So we've got lowest sagittal height value, which means it's more elevated, and higher sagittal height value is less elevated. So you can think of it of something like a cookie cutter. So they come in different sizes, and it will give you different data at every size of that cookie cutter. So think of it of designing the lens inside out. So first, of course, you're looking at the cornea. So fit the cornea, corneal clearance, and get proper central clearance. So we're looking at that sort of a chord length of 9 millimeters. It gives us that fold. It gives us the space that we need underneath that contact lens. So from there on, you then need to start thinking of the haptic. So something like 13 millimeters. Which is about 1 millimeter over the limbus, which is really where the scleral lens will start landing. So limbal clearance ensures proper lens diameter by assessing where the lens starts to land in relation to the limbus. So the first landing point, we need to check the maximal sag difference at a chord length of 13 to quantify the toricity at the first landing. So do we need something like a spherical lens, or do you need something like a toric lens that actually will start landing? So the haptic, so we're sort of checking the sag difference between the temporal and the nasal at a chord of 15. So once you've checked it at 13, you then realize you need something like a toric lens. Do we need to go further than that? Because a lot of the time you would also need something to actually prevent decentration. Excuse me. So check the max sag difference at the chord length, and that will sort of give you an idea on what exactly is going on at 15. Do you need something like an extra toric, or do we need something like a quad or even a free-form lens? So if the differences between the min sag and the max sag get so big in comparison to the 13 millimeters and the 15 millimeters, you will need to go for something like perhaps a toric quad specific or something like a free-form lens. And fitting actually something like a free-form lens without a profilometer is virtually impossible. Or maybe is impossible. So looking at the sort of diagnostic or empirical fitting. So diagnostic lens set, actually historically, scleral lens fitting involves using diagnostic set, and it works absolutely fine. Trying multiple lenses to find the best fit. It's determined proper sag, so of course you get your basics. Some people use the intuition, some people sort of use the topographer, but actually to determine a proper sag or scleral alignment based on trial and error as well as fit the intuition. Over refraction can be added to calculate the final lens power. The problem with this is that it frequently requires placing multiple diagnostic lenses on the eye. So of course it depends on what's going in. If the difference between your min sag and max sag is so big, but you don't know that because you use a diagnostic lens set, sometimes it could mean that you have to put something like 3 or 4, if not more, lenses on the eye to get a better idea of the fit. So frequently requires multiple reorders to get the scleral zone to fit right. You use your trial set, but of course then you order a lens and then you need to see how it settles. Limited access to fitting lenses when disinfecting. So in some places, I know in the UK for a long time we were not allowed to use trial lenses. So they either had to be sent back to the manufacturer to get them cleaned, or you sort of had to throw them away and start again. I know there's some institutions in the United States where they will not let you reuse trial lenses. So again, it could cause a problem from that point of view. So looking at empirical fit, it acquires a reliable scleral profile. So we are sort of just going back to taking good measurements. So depending on which profilometer you use, in our case, you would need to use fluorescein. You need to get like a mix of hyaluronic acid with fluorescein to get a nice stable tear film, which also means that actually if you have a dry eye patient, they will use their drops a little bit more before they come in, to get that stable tear film, to get that reflection, to get your grade map. And Jason Jetlika, he's one of the people that sort of designed Zen Lens and done a lot of research on the sclera measurements. It's sort of garbage in, garbage out. So making sure you've got good measurements, and it's really with any topographer or any profilometer, taking good measurements will give you good lens results. So it requires a good measurement. It requires back vertex power. The required back vertex power can be determined. So you can either use a gas permeable lens, place it on the eye as long as you know the power, the base curve, and the over refraction. It will recalculate everything for you. You can start with a plano lens. So a lot of the time, if you have a complicated eye and you don't know the power, it's, I suppose it's a trial lens that's specifically made for this patient. So even if you have to order one and then do your over refraction, you've got a custom-made trial lens for this patient's eye. So start with the plano lens, ordered off the profilometry. Actually, the first lens that you apply, and we hear that a lot of the time the patient, it's a much closer fit, so it's a positive experience for the patient and for the practice. Less chair time, so you're actually getting a lot more people into their lenses a lot quicker. And this order the first and the final lens. So it is a much more efficient process for all involved. I've got a little video here, which is actually about 10 minutes. I'm just going to see if I can play it.
So really the future is now. And in the past, before profilometry, before a few years ago for me, the part of the eye that we were fitting was the only part of the eye I did not know the shape of.
How can you not think that this beautiful piece of equipment is not the future? Empirical fitting, accuracy of measurement is the future, but now.
So I don't know, I would ask anyone in the room if they fit corneal lenses and they could imagine fitting corneal lenses without corneal topography. Of course they can, but the process will be longer, more complicated, and the reorders of the lens is definitely higher. So that's exactly the same thing with profilometry.
Scleral profilometry, you do get more information with the cornea and the sclera, and it's much more than just topography. Right? With scleral lenses, we're fitting on the sclera. So we need that information, and we need to know how we can custom tailors to create more of a free-form design type of lens.
The Eaglet gives us so much data and information. I mean, for me, even after simply reviewing the map, I have a mental picture of what the trial set lens will look like on the eye even before I've placed it there.
Using profilometry today has been a huge advantage in choosing a better lens design to start with. So
scleral lenses are very stable in the eye and they do not move, or at least they shouldn't move. And this is why if we have information about the sclera and the area where the lens lands, we can predict the on-eye lens performance and the fitting relationship. And this is the basis to design and fit more and more customizable scleral lenses and image-guided freeform scleral lenses as well.
Profilometry fitting has come to stay as far as I'm concerned, being about the pioneer in Africa, you know, with the Eaglet. It's revolutionary. Imagine prior to this time, I had to change sometimes 7, sometimes 9 lenses. With profilometry base, which is the Eaglet scanner, I just do 1-2 fits, 1-2 fits, and that's it.
in our practice, one of the most exciting ways that the ESP has changed our practice is actually how we do our fitting with and what we use our staff for. Before I even see a patient, my staff are trained to use the ESP, collect data that's high quality, and they use that data to pull starting lenses for me, get them on the patient before I even have to look at any of the data myself.
I think the big keyword here for me is efficiency. More precision leads to less remakes, which leads to happier patients and happier me.
So using the ESP and scleral profilometry has completely changed the way I fit lenses. And I'll never forget back when I first started using it, and a couple of consultants said to me, "Hey doc, we've noticed your fits are so different now than previously and so different than anybody else. But we've also noticed that it's working and you're not doing redos and we're not doing all this stuff." And so
this piece of equipment is giving us a much quicker speed of choosing the first lens. It's giving us much more patient enjoyment in terms of allowing a more rapid response of the final fit, and it's making the visits for the patient more fun and interesting because we're using the highest, latest technology to give a really quick and rapid idea of the front scleral topography to allow us to choose the lens, get the patient on the go and give them vision straight away.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. The benefit it brings to my practice, to my patients, having to see technology that can create solutions is amazing.
You know, it also means less time that you need to spend on the phone with consultations, since you can very easily send the image data directly to the lab along with any notes.
One of the biggest things I like about it is that it's not really manufacturer dependent. You can use this instrument with several lenses, and also just the first fit lens algorithm. For those that are new to fitting sclerals, you know, this really helps drive what first lens you're going to grab from your fit set or what it's going to recommend for your overfraction, but it also just helps design the first lens to be really close to your final lens.
So empirical fitting with profilometry is essential, and I think that it will be our future, the future everyone. Empirical fitting is the future, but customized lenses are the future. And if you don't have the profilometry, you will not be able to stay at the level of the research and all the design that we are having.
See the ability for us not just to focus on the sclera, but the ability to focus on the cornea, you know, the topography of the cornea and the sclera itself, the ability to be able to move, you know, up to 22 millimeters and beyond, the ability for us to be able to do orthokeratology, which has really never been done here before, is amazing.
Nope. I think I would cry. I would cry, and I might quit. Go into pursue a career in music.
So it's tough. It's tough.
Either that or become a bartender and go help serve sclerals on the beach for Brian Tompkins.
It's a step back. Now I can still do it, and I'm 90% art and a small percent of technology and science, versus with scleral profilometry, I'm 90% science and then throw in my art after that.
So yeah, now imagining this, I'm feeling oppressed. Of course, I can find a way to fit lenses without profilometry, but it would be, oh my God, I'm just feeling bad already. No, I cannot imagine my practice without profilometry.
No, I can't. In fact, I started to fit regularly scleral lenses in 2017, and I added the ESP to my practice in 2017. I realized that if I wanted to fit scleral lenses, I needed info about the sclera. So I'd say that I have never fitted scleral contact lenses without a profilometry.
Sure, I'm not going back. I will get another Eaglet. I will wait till the Eaglet comes, because with the Eaglet, you can see, we can saw. I am not going back. The Eaglet is the future. Thank you very much.
Because I've gotten so used to having it there and it just being part of my workflow and my daily routine that if someone told me the Eaglet was gone, I'd say, we better get that back or I'm quitting. No.
I can imagine. It's actually happened to me a few times. We've had a in and out relationship over the last decade, the ESP and I together. And quite frankly, when I've lost it, when I don't have it, I feel like I've lost my fitting sparkle.
It's tough, but I wouldn't go back. Maybe I should get a second one in case someone takes that first one.
So I will not be happy. My patients neither, so definitely not.
How would I feel if the ESP was taken away from me? I'd probably miss it as much as this little Rufus here. I would be bereft and there would be a hole in my heart. So ESP, you rock.
So here we're going to be looking at some of the case reports that actually that have been used for the profilometer. Can you see my screen okay again?
Yeah, we can see your slides, yes.
Ah, perfect, thank you. So here, this is one of Barry Leonard, who you heard speaking earlier. So high against the rule astigmatism. So he's a 51-year-old sheriff, post-LASIK aphasia. The best vision that he was getting with his spectacle RX was 20/40. So due to his occupation, spectacles are not an option. He is a sheriff, he probably gets in fights and things like that. He had been using custom keratoconus Carasop lenses, and the VA with his contact lenses, soft contact lenses, was 20/25. He would be happier with sharper vision for his occupation. So scans were taken with the profilometry maps were taken with the ESP. It showed a high against the rule astigmatism. So as we said earlier, so you've got your two reference spheres. The blue is underneath, so it's below the reference sphere. So looking at different chord length here, so you're looking at a chord length of 13, chord length of 15, chord length of 17. As we mentioned earlier, the 13 is really where the haptic starts landing. 15 sort of see what's going on, what you need for centration of the contact lens. And then, of course, the chord length of 17 is the total diameter of the lens. Now, you can see here that there's a difference between the chord length of 13 and the chord length of 17, apologies, of 580 microns. So if you think about a trial lens, say you're going to sort of put a trial lens on the eye and you're taking it 50 micron steps every time you realize that it's not fitting that well. That probably means something like placing 8 lenses on the eye until you get 80 micron difference. So we've got a nomogram to help decide on what lenses to fit. It depends on which lenses you're fitting. So some of you might choose something like a toric in a haptic, or something like a toric or a quad-specific lens. In other cases, the algorithms will actually calculate everything for you. So here we're saying that if you're looking at a chord length of 13 millimeters and the difference between the min sag and the max sag is over 100 microns, you need something like a toric transition zone. So you need to start thinking of what lens you want to fit on how to best help the patient. From there, you can then check what's going on the chord length of 15. So we're having a T-sag and sag. If it's over 400 microns, you need something like a quad specific. If not, you can probably go for the toric haptic or a spheric haptic, depending on what's going on at that chord length of 13 that you choose, that you looked at earlier. Of course, anything like a pinguecula or something like that, you're going to need to treat slightly different. So you're going to need something like a microvolt or bleb to actually take or channel, some sort of smart channel to cope with that pinguecula. In some of the cases, if the differences between the min sag and the max sag, or even sort of the ocular disease is too big, you might need to actually design that lens for you, or help you design the lens. So in this case, we have the first lens fit prediction. You can see here that it was a 17 diameter, the sags were 5150, 5550, base curve of 8, we had steep 3, steep 10. So he was fitted with a Zen lens BE, because of course we noticed that at that chord length of 13, there was more than 100 microns difference. So you need something to stabilize that lens in the haptic. So the actual lens that the final fit was 4,950 and 5,500 with a steep 4 and a steep 6. So you can actually see how accurate the first lens fit, even on a highly irregular shape. So in this case, 2 lenses rather than the 8 or 9 that you might have had to try without this data. So again, for the left eye, the predictions were really close. So he ended up with about, the prediction was 5,100, 5,600. OCT image here as well. The patient was really happy with 20/20, better quality of vision and comfort versus his previous lenses. So he was coping okay with his lenses, but actually now he's got these lenses, he's much happier with the vision and the comfort that he's getting with them. So the next case is a case from Christine Sint. So she had a 50-year-old male, mild KCN, presented with complaints of pain and hyperemia. You can see that he's got a pinguecula. The lens is sort of just popping through that pinguecula, and it was sort of making his eye red, and it was making his eye uncomfortable. He was wearing a small diameter toric scleral lens. As you can see that the actual edge is just sitting on the pinguecula. So with that, she discontinued lens wear. So of course, with anything, the eye needs washing out. So if you would like a good lens prediction, you're going to need to get rid of the scleral imprints. That's with any lens that you fit, get rid of the scleral imprints before you actually start refitting the patient. In some cases, that could be really difficult. Of course, the patient is completely reliant on his contact lenses. So where possible, if the lenses can be left out, perhaps fit one eye at a time so they can still see out of their other eye. Sort of get them to come in on the Monday so they can be without their contact lenses at the weekend, just to give that eye a chance to get the best lens available to them. So lens was discontinued, some steroids were added, and he returned for a refit. So eye is nice and clear, there was no redness. But actually look in here, we've got some elevation. So we looked at that pinguecula earlier. It's got another elevation sort of nasally, and another one superior there as well. So this is the sort of the overlay. So this would be the bisphere elevation map, and you can see the little elevations that we show in there. So the lens that was decided on was a ScanFit Pro. So with the data that we're getting from the profilometer, this is actually sent to the software from ScanFit Pro, and the lens is going to be designed from there. So we've got the Eaglet Scan. It's quite similar to sort of the blue goo that people use. So the blue goo probably would be for the even more complicated eye, but actually the ScanFit Pro can cope with a lot, probably about 90–95% of complicated eyes. So again, sort of the Eaglet Scan, and then of course the lens is designed by their computer system. Every point matters. So we're saying that actually good scans again are important, but actually also every point matters. So it's mapped out and it's designed from there. And as you can see here, so we've got that elevation that they were worrying about, that they're also going to have a little bit of a fold for. And this is the lens that came out. So this is sort of an image of the lens that was designed by the ScanFit Pro with the scan from the profilometer. So this would be the FLUR simulation of the contact lens that was designed. And this is what the final lens looked like here. So from Chris' point of view, so the ScanFit Pro and the Eye Surface Profiler, some handy tips: quality data, best fit lens, follow the device instructions. So it will be different for whatever device you're using. Secure the latest software, so make sure that both the software from the Eaglet or your profilometer is as up to date as you can get it, as well as the ScanFit Pro software as well. So scan smooth data, compares the images, and post-processing is easy. Now, as we mentioned earlier, of course, the profilometer can also be used for ortho-K fitting. So we have various algorithms to calculate lenses. We've got the decision tree here. So of course you still need to process your patient, I suppose. It's actually just making sure that they are aware of everything that's available before they actually start deciding on which way to go. So your decision tree, of course, you've got your cyclopedic auto refraction, confirmed, not confirmed. You're sort of looking at the actual length. Then deciding, depending on where you are you going to have contact lenses, or are you going to have spectacles, or are you going to have something like a combined therapy with atropine drops as well? And the recommendations, of course, still the same. So make sure that you go outside, cut down on your computer use, make sure that you're spending some time outside, lighting, reading distance, and nutrition. So a lot of that also still needs to come into the equation. So we're then looking at the actual decision tree on what to fit patients with. So again, it sort of just helps you here. Are we looking at the different pupil size? Is the myopia over 250, under 250? Astigmatism, all of that can be taken into account to then help you decide if you should go for something like a soft lens, or if you go for a hybrid, or if you go for something like Ortho-K. So the Ortho-K design nomogram, of course, we need a healthy eye. Unlike what we use for scleral lenses, we need to make sure that you've got a regular cornea before you actually start fitting Ortho-K lenses. So healthy, regular shape. Recommendations of the manufacturers, 6 diopters of myopia with about a 1.75 still. I know there's a few tests being done with different lenses, so even scleral Ortho-K, where you might be able to get away with a higher SIL, but at the moment this is how it stands. Then we're looking at this different sectoricity to help you decide which spherical return zone you need, if you need a toric return zone, and it will then looking at the toricity at 10 millimeters to see if you need a spherical alignment zone or a toric alignment zone. So fitting options here, we've got the empirical fitting. So you're looking at Ks, HVID, and Rx. The return zones and the landing zones are extrapolated from the central K values. So say you've taken some topography Ks, it's kind of just measuring about 5, 6, maybe 7 millimeters. But of course, if we're thinking about the return zone and the landing zone, they're going to be right on the edge. So you're looking at return zone probably at about 6, 7, 8 millimeters, but the landing zones are actually right on the edge of the lens. So 10, 10.5, 11, depending on the HVID. So you can use a fitting set. They are limited toric options available, and it's a computer-assisted design. So with the if you're sort of if you have the measurements that you're taking with the profilometer, it will calculate it for you. So depending on which lens you use, in Eaglet's case, we have got some algorithms that will calculate everything for you. So it will calculate the return zone and the landing zone, but that's based on the bigger picture rather than on just the central K values. So we're just looking at some case reports here. So these are from Rolando Ortiz. He's been fitting the Paragon CRT for quite some time using the Eaglet to get his data. So in this case, we have a 13-year-old female. She's a spectacle wearer, and she was first seen in practice 3 years ago. Now, a lot of this, of course, is education. So it is talking to the parent. It's just making the right decisions. A lot of the time, these kids are too young to make their own decisions. They need to be involved with the decisions. But ultimately, the parent needs to be behind it and understand what's going on. So 2019, that was subscription, -150, -225. 2020, COVID hit, some appointments were cancelled, and this female missed her appointment. Then, of course, when she came back in 2021, it had increased in her right eye by 1 diopter and half a diopter in the left eye. 2022, again, quite a change, 0.50 more myopic in one eye, and actually another diopter in the left eye. So from that point of view, from there on, the options were discussed with the patient and the parents. So they talked about MySight soft lens and atropine drops, and CRT, so the ortho-K. Now, of course, we talk about atropine, and actually we did a bit of some research on some of the papers. In a lot of the countries, optometrists are not allowed to prescribe atropine. So in the States, of course, they can have these combination of spectacles and atropine, or contact lenses and atropine. But if we sort of think about Europe, that's something that can only be done by the ophthalmologist. So CRT was selected as the preferred treatment option. So the measurements were taken with the ESP, and again, good scan. So for ortho-K, probably even more important to get your central, so to get your centration and your focus right, because we are just measuring that part of the cornea. So ortho-K first lens fit was used to calculate lens. We would then set that measurement as baseline, which means that when the patient comes back for their follow-up, you can compare the maps. So you've got your comparison maps. So in this case, of course, you've got your power of 0.50, which need to be really sitting at the pupil center to give you that spectacle blur. The HVID is based, the diameter is based on the HVID, and then of course the landing zones and the return zones are calculated by the data that we've got with the ESP. This was a new CRT wearer, so I suppose it's just making sure that they actually know how to insert and remove the lenses. So initially, Dr. Ortiz actually shows a video, and then he follows it up by a practical session with the technician. Patient was seen for a 3-week follow-up, and she was happy with the vision and the comfort of the lens. If in this case the patient did have issues, the diameter could have been increased. If we're sort of just looking at the images here, vision was 20/20 in both eyes. So these are the comparison maps. So we've got a baseline measurement. So you've got your bisphere elevation map, which is the baseline measurement. And then the other three, so the actual curvature difference map, the tangential curvature difference map, and the power profile are the follow-up maps. That's just really to show that the lens is sitting centrally, that it's not giving you the smiley face or the frowny face where you need to change the return zones. And then of course the power profile will give you an idea on how much of the power has changed. And really what we're aiming for with fluorescein pattern is that bullseye. So you've got your central, then you've got your fluorescein, and then again a slightly darker patch. So the bullseye pattern is what you're looking for with fluorescein. So this is the right eye, and then we've got the follow-up maps for the left eye here. You can actually see that, I'm just going back here, you can actually see the difference in your actual curvature difference map on how the lens is fitting. So the OS is fitting slightly more central. So you can actually also see that by the bullseye pattern. But as the patient wasn't having any problems and the vision was 20/20, it was left as it was. So the last case for today was, again, ortho-K. So it's a 10-year-old female, high myo. She was initially seen in 2017 when she was 6 years old. So it's 4 years prior. At the time, she was -2 to 5 and -2. Back then, so when she was 10 years old, the myopia management was suggested, but parents did not want to start treatment at that stage. So 2018, she had about an extra diopter in both eyes. 2019, she had an extra diopter in the right, half a diopter in the left. And after 3 years, 2020, the parents were actually keen to start some treatment. By that time, she was -525 and -475. So ideally, we probably would have started treating that a little bit earlier. She started on atropine and visual correction with ISIN +4 was the preferred option at that stage. In 2021, CRT was started, but the lenses were never comfortable. And then in 2022, after no lenses for a month, the ESP was actually used in this case to take the corneal measurements. So in 2021, it was just based on K readings. 2022, it was based on the maps from the ESP. So refraction at the time was -550, -5. We're sort of looking at K's of 43.5, 43.5. So from there, the lens was ordered. So you can also see that we do give the SIM case on the profilometer, but of course we are basing this on SAGs. So following taking good scans, I know I keep going back to that, but is it really important to get good scans? The lens fit was again used for the calculation of the lens. The diameter is calculated based on the HVID, and the first pair of lenses was ordered. So with the follow-up, again, we've got the baseline measurement there, we've got the actual curvature difference map, the tangential curvature difference map, and the power profile. Again, fit-wise, it actually looked okay. We had this bullseye pattern. Same for the left eye there, although you could sort of see that the bullseye pattern is probably not, the fluorescein is much wider than it is on the other image. At the follow-up appointment, the lens was checked for centration, over refraction, and fluor pattern for the return zone and the landing zone. And following the Paragon CRT fitting guide, some adjustments had to be made, and the second pair was ordered. So the second pair actually gave her slightly different parameters on the return zone than the landing zones, but it solved the issues the patient was having regarding the vision. So she ended up 20/20 in both eyes. So just a little bit of recap here. So here we've got the first lens fit. So in the case of the profilometer, all we do with a Paragon CRT is we actually put in the spectacle prescription. So this is completely empirical. We don't need to place a lens on the eye, but with the spectacle prescription, you can then do the calculations. It will then give you the diameter based on the HVID, your return zones, your base curve, and your landing zones there as well. So the first lens fit under the hood, as my colleague likes to call it, it calculates each section independently. So it will calculate the base curve, it will calculate the optical zone and the return zone and the landing zone. It's got unique control points based on SAG. So the optical zone, 6 millimeters. This is not something that you can override. So we've also got the option, we've got 5 millimeters or 6 millimeters. You can change the adjustment factor. If you don't want plus 50, you can choose +1. Since a few weeks ago, we also have a fluor simulation. So once you calculate the lens, it will actually give you an idea of what the lens is going to look like on the eye as well. So again, the optical zone, you've got your return zone and your landing zone. So first lens fit, we've got the return zone at 8 millimeters. So I suppose it's just making sure that you know actually what's going on with the eye at 8 millimeters, so you can get that return zone. And then your landing zone around about 10 millimeters, again, making sure that you get the right landing zone going with the shape of the eye. And I know I've already mentioned it, but good measurement is key. So as Jason Jetlica says, garbage in, garbage out. So for scleral lens fitting and ortho-K, it's super important to get those measurements. So we're focusing on the focus and the speed. For ortho-K, speed is probably slightly more crucial than it is for scleral lenses. You've got your quality checks. So it's just making sure that actually the quality indicators are saying, okay, you've got good centration, you've got good focus, you've got enough coverage. Thinking about scleral lenses, of course, we need much more coverage than you would need for ortho-K lens. For ortho-K, we're sort of saying Limbus plus about 1 millimeter. For scleral lens, we need a minimum of 7 millimeters from the apex of the eye. So overall scan, minimum of 14 millimeters. Bigger if possible, bigger is better. So we're getting scans of up to 20 millimeters, 22 millimeters. So open the eyelids at least 1 millimeter, and this is in reference to the ortho-K. Align and focus the device precisely. Be fast at taking measurements. We recommend you take 3 scans per eye, and that's not to stitch or extrapolate. That's really so you have the best scan. You've got your patient in the chair. They haven't traveled, they haven't got to travel back for 5 hours, which in some cases is the case. So just making sure that you've got good measurements before the patient leaves. Then evaluate the maps before the patient leaves, just in case they do have to travel. So as you could hear, some of the users, they are quite happy to take for the technicians to take the measurements, but the technicians also know when they're good scans. So just before that patient goes, make sure you've got good scans. And that is pretty much it. So we've got some references here. So of course, a lot of it is taken out of the clear report. I'll leave those on there for now, just so you can see. If you do have any questions or any suggestions, either put them in the chat box or leave your details, and then I can pick those up at some stage after this session.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Karin, for that wonderful sharing. I think this is probably something new concept for a couple of us as well, because we have not a chance to play around. We have seen it in the lectures. I know that we had a session last year as well where we went through. We had a couple of other speakers also talking about this. It's a bit new to this part of the world, I would say, and I think it is getting more popular because we now understand by research, as you well presented, that only I think about 5 or less than 6% of the sclera is spherical. And most of our trial lenses are with spherical haptics, right?
Yeah. So, and I think you actually also see the difference in what the labs do now. Of course, there's many more freeform lenses available than there were 3-4 years ago. So the whole of the understanding is better. But of course, what are we going to do now we understand? We're going to have to get something like a freeform lens or more adaptable lenses where you can change the landing zone and the in haptics as well.
That's right. Yeah. One question which probably I think if you can just give us a very short overview on how is the measurement process. I know you did tell about instilling fluorescein, open the eyes wider, take multiple scans, but would you want to go through the basic way of how to do measurement? Because it's a bit different, I suppose, than doing a tomography and a topography.
Yes, and of course for the profilometers on the market, there is also a difference. But in the case of the eye surface profiler, we're actually saying we need a stable tear film because, of course, the sclera is not a reflecting surface, so we need something to make it reflective.
Right.
So in this case, we would actually use like a hyaluronic acid drop to get that stable tear film, which is before we line up the ESP. Then we would align the ESP and then actually wet the fluorette with the hyaluronic acid drop. So not saline, we're using a hyaluronic acid drop to get a bit more of a viscous drop, not too viscous, which is why we're using the hyaluronic acid. Then from there, you sort of just need to make sure that the whole of the sclera is covered. So you lay the fluorette flat on the eye, superior, temporal, inferior, get the patient to blink just to spread that fluorescein and then take your measurement. So because you've aligned the ESP, it should be quite quick. So in case of proper alignment, you can probably take 3 images in about 35 seconds. So it's super quick as well. And with some of the other profilometers, of course, you need to take different gazes. So you need to look up, look down. And if that doesn't quite match, you need to stitch the image, but it takes a little bit longer. So the ESP from a usable point of view it's super quick once you get the hang of actually using it.
I see. So it's a one measurement which gives almost 20 mm of the dimension. Your patient does not have to change the gaze of it's just
looking straight ahead. Yeah, it's just making sure that you get the eyelids out of the way. So some people use lid sticks, some people use fingers. It's just to get as much of that sclera exposed as possible. Yeah, and then it's a single shot. And as I say, we've seen measurements of up to 20 millimeters 22 millimeters in a single shot.
Okay, and how immediate is the the maps? Does it take a little bit time, or it's quite?
There are 500,000 data points, so the upload really depends on your Wi-Fi, but really should only take about 20 seconds.
Okay. Because I think in the end you gave a very good message. I think that is something which is very important with the profiler as well as with the topographer that, make sure your measurements are correct before the patient walks out. You just don't take measurements and say bye and then call back the patient to come back again, right?
And you saw John Samseli, who's one of our users. His patients travel sometimes 5-6 hours. One of them had to come, I think, from the States back to Nigeria, and the same in the States, and I'm sure it's the same in India, that people travel 5-6 hours to get to their opticians to get scleral fits. In the UK, that probably would be unheard of. Oh, no, actually saying that they probably do about 3 or 4 hour traveling for that. So yes, super important to make sure that you've got a good scan before the patient goes.
Right. And I think the other thing I would kind of discuss more on is the advantage of being connected with most of the labs. You did mention that you can design the lens using the information yourself in the office. So how would that change the practice? I know you would have talked about a little bit there, but if you'd like to share that point.
So in case of the iSearch profiler, we're lab neutral, but that does mean that we have about 50 algorithms actually connected to the iSearch profiler. Now, of course, sometimes you haven't got access to those particular labs. You can probably get the lenses, but not necessarily from those labs. But it does mean that you can use that data to design your lens. So you can get your Zen Lens BE, or you can get your ScanFit Pro. For some of it, you need a extra bit of software that actually takes you from our software into their software. So we're thinking about something like Wave, ScanFit Pro, Boston 360. For that, good scan connects to their software, and then the lens will be designed from there. So different labs will be doing different things, but with the data that you have, you can design the lenses.
You can design, yeah. So that again makes life for the practitioner very easy. You don't have to be kind of fully dependent, but you're having so much data, so you can explore and things like that before you kind of finalize an order, right?
And we do also have users that design their own lenses, so they just use our data to design their own lenses. And of course, again, it just means that they know exactly what's going on with the lens. So we sort of think of someone like Daddy Fidel. Yeah. She does her own lens design, and she uses our Profilometry to do that design. We've been part of Euroschool recently, so she also has a little Dremel to do her microvolts and to sort of do her labs in the lens as well. So she just uses the data to then design the lens from there.
So in short, there are many options for a practitioner, in terms of the scope of the practice and the availability in your region as well. So it's not just you have to have an ESP plus only you can work with this manufacturer. It's not like that, but
no. And you can make it as hard or as difficult as you like for yourself, really. Press the button or get more involved with it.
That's right. Wonderful. So I think thank you so much, Karin, for spending your Sunday afternoon with us, taking us through the ESP and profilometry in general as well, and letting us know what's coming up probably in the nearby future very soon for us. So thank you so much to you and to the Eaglet Eye as well for supporting this session.
Thank you for having me, and it's been very good. So if you do get any questions via your platform, then just let me know.
Sure. We'll direct it to you. So if later on, if anybody has questions, we'll always connect you to them. So thank you so much. So
thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thanks. We do have a session planned over the next couple of weeks. Until then, take care, be safe, and I'll see you during the next session. Have a good day and bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.